Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Rainbow Six Siege on the GeForce GT 1030. For performance monitoring this time I won't be using cam due to BattleEye, which is the anti-cheat software this game uses, so in the meantime I'll be using MSI Afterburner. And if you want to support me, there are Humble and Amazon affiliate links down in the description. So Rainbow Six Siege, I'll be doing 1080p, 900p and 720p. To skip those sections of the video, check the description below. I'm targeting 60 frames per second because the consoles do the same, even the base PS4 and Xbox One. So first of all, on 1080p I use a mix between medium and low settings. Shading and shadows are on medium, reflections on low, ambient occlusion on SSBC, lens effects I have bloom enabled. I also have TAA and render scale at 25%. I'll explain more about that in a second. Then on 900p I use slightly higher settings. I was able to enable HBAO+, keep reflections on medium, shading on medium as well, and crank up shadows to very high. The render scale was still at 25%. And finally at 720p I was able to pretty much max it out, except in textures, which will stay at high across the whole video because we don't have enough VRAM for more than that. Oh well, now I'm going to talk about the resolution scale stuff. So before Operation Red Orchid, we used to have an option called temporal filtering. Temporal filtering was like they do on consoles on most games nowadays. They use checkerboarding to use a lower resolution than native, but upscale, for example, to 1080p in this case, so you have half the resolution. That means that each of the axes, 1920 and 1080, used to be at half the value each. That means that we're actually rendering the game at 960 by 540, 50% on each of the axes of the resolution. After Red Orchid released, they removed temporal filtering. Apparently they just merged it with the option temporal anti-aliasing, or TAA, and they cranked up the resolution limitation. So instead of being half the resolution, it was a little higher. Plus, with temporal anti-aliasing enabled, we have a blurrier image than by just using temporal filtering, which most people hated because temporal filtering did a great job by hiding the fact that you were using half the resolution. Temporal filtering is still merged with TAA, but now you can choose the render scale option. You can choose how much to lower the resolution. So in order to keep it like temporal filtering used to be, I kept the render scale at 25%. That means that it's half the pixels at each of the axes of the resolution. So on 1080p, for example, once again, we're getting 960 by 540, half of the value of each of the axes on 1920 by 1080. It looks blurrier than before, don't get me wrong, because it's mixed with TAA, but you can now choose how much to sharpen the image. I recommend staying between 15 and 25%, so the image doesn't get kinda screwed up. But I did this in order to get a much higher frame rate. If I didn't do this on 1080p, for example, if I put this at 100% instead of 25, I get like 30 frames per second, so it's around half the frame rate. But on 720p, if you use medium settings and the resolution scale at 100%, you can be at 60 frames per second just fine. But remember, always a higher frame rate helps because the controls get less latency, so you'll have a more fluid experience overall, even if you have just a 60Hz monitor. And well, in order to get the best performance, again, just lower the render scaling option to get the biggest difference in performance. Also, ambient occlusion, reflections, shadows and shading help to increase performance, especially shading, if you lower it from high to medium, and reflections, because they are using screen space reflections, which are quite demanding. And if you're just going to play in a competitive way and want to have the biggest visual advantage, I would recommend disabling ambient occlusion because that will give you a more clear visibility indoors, since ambient occlusion just adds darkness in between objects, so that can make it more difficult to find an enemy indoors, something to keep in mind. And you'll notice that the GT 1030 is overclocked across the whole video. That's because I forgot to turn off the overclock. But since on 900p and 720p we are way higher than 60 frames per second, you should still be at over 60 frames per second anyway. I mean, it was between 70 and 100 frames per second on 720p, and on 900p I was quite close to that number as well. So I'll just expect around 5 to 10 FPS less, so you won't drop below 60 frames per second. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Aí caiu na minha trap aqui, onde que eu tô aqui?
Op 4 eliminated. Mission successful. located a bomb. The diffuser has been recovered. Proceed to bomb's location and defuse it.
Calma aí, Termite, explode ainda aí não. Calma aí, não explode. Tira, acho que vai explodir. Ah, não.
Cluster charge going up. Full frag!
One Op 4 remaining. Drop it. Op 4 neutralized. Mission successful. Protect the bombs.
Jammer initiated. Reinforcing the wall!
5 seconds left.
Jammer activated.
Bomb locations are secure.
Jammer activated. Wall secured!
Quase.
Jammer ready.
Op 4 has located a bomb. You know what to do. Op 4 located a bomb. Protect it. neutralized. Proceed to bomb's location and defuse it. The diffuser is no longer in your possession. The diffuser has been secured.
Cover me! Reloading!
Activating drone. Tracking online. Special charge. Loading mag!
You have dropped the diffuser. The diffuser has been recovered. Diffuser is online and active.
Em cima. Que isso, cara? Meu Deus, velho.
Down to one friendly.
Tá desativando, vai, tá desativando, velho. Nossa,
Op 4 eliminated. Friendly mission successful.
tava uma. Doc, ajuda ela lá, mano.
Vamos a estar uno y yo.
Reload! Estamos algo.
Op 4, last operator standing. Friendlies victorious. Hostiles eliminated.